I knew something was terribly wrong the moment I woke up and saw the zipper of my tent slowly opening, even though I was the only one supposed to be out there. First, I thought I was still dreaming. You know that heavy, foggy feeling when reality hasn't settled in yet? But the sound was too clear, too deliberate. The slow scraping of metal, the faint rustle of nylon, the cold whisper of air slipping inside. Someone or something was opening my tent from the outside. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at that tiny gap forming in the darkness, and for a moment, all I heard was my heartbeat pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape before I could. And then came the smell. A warm, rotten, animal-like stench that didn't belong to any campsite, any trail, any forest I'd ever been in. It was so strong it made my eyes water. That's the moment I knew this wasn't a friend messing with me. It wasn't a ranger. It wasn't a hiker. It was something else. The zipper paused, right at the halfway point, as if whoever was on the other side realized I was awake. I swear I felt a presence leaning closer, pressing its weight against the thin fabric. I could see the silhouette now, tall, hunched, breathing so slowly it felt intentional, like it was enjoying watching me freeze. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to scream, to do anything other than lie there silently like prey. But my body locked up. My fingers dug into my sleeping bag. My teeth clamped so tight I tasted blood. Then, as quietly as it started, the zipper began moving again, back up. Whoever was there didn't run, didn't make a sound, didn't leave, just closed the tent. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I didn't even blink for more than a second at a time. I just watched the fabric. Every shift of the wind felt like fingers brushing against it. Every creak of the trees sounded like footsteps circling my campsite. But the worst part? When morning finally came, when I crawled out of the tent shaking and exhausted, I saw something that shouldn't have been possible. Surrounding my tent, perfectly circling it, were footprints. Not boots. Not animal tracks. Bare feet. Huge. Deeply pressed into the dirt. And facing the tent. All of them. As if something walked in a slow, patient circle all night long, watching, deciding, waiting. I don't know how long I stood there staring at them, too scared to even breathe. But the realization hit me so hard it made my knees buckle. Those footprints weren't there when I pitched my tent the night before. And the worst part? They went only one way, toward my campsite. There were no footprints leaving. My name is Daniel Reyes, and I've always believed that the quietest places on earth are the best places to clear your head. That's why at 26 years old, whenever life gets too loud or too complicated, I pack my gear, throw it in the back of my truck, and head straight for the woods. Camping has always been my reset button. My escape from deadlines, phone notifications, and the constant buzz of everyday life. That weekend was supposed to be no different. I'd driven out to Pine Hollow National Forest, a huge stretch of wilderness about 4 hours from my apartment. It was early fall, the kind of crisp, golden weather season where the air feels just cold enough to wake you up but not enough to bite. I'd left home around noon and pulled into the forest trailhead just after 3 p.m. The sun was still high, glowing warm and orange through the treetops as I unloaded my backpack and started the mile-long hike to my usual campsite. I'd been there before. A small clearing near a creek, far enough off the trail that you could sit for hours without hearing another human voice. Just the stream, the wind, and the occasional bird cutting through the silence. I loved that spot because it always felt untouched, preserved, like the world had left it alone. That day, everything felt extra peaceful. The sky was clear, the trail was dry, and the forest smelled like pine and distant smoke from someone's campfire miles away. I remember thinking how perfect it all felt, how rare it was to find moments like that when nothing felt wrong, heavy, or rushed. My mind was calm. My mood was relaxed. I wasn't thinking about work, bills, or anything stressful. I was just looking forward to a quiet night under the stars. By the time I reached the clearing, it was around 4 p.m. The sunlight filtered through the trees at a soft angle, and the creek beside the campsite sparkled like it was scattered with tiny pieces of glass. I set my pack on the ground, stretched my shoulders, and took a deep breath of the cold, clean air. It almost felt too good to be real. I pitched my tent, hammered in the stakes, and set up my little cooking area. I wasn't in any rush. I had nowhere to be, no one expecting me, and hours before sunset. Everything was calm. Everything was quiet. I even put on a playlist of ambient nature sounds, ironically adding fake birds to a forest full of real ones, just because it made the moment feel complete. As the afternoon slowly shifted toward evening, I sat on a fallen log, sipping hot coffee from my thermos and watching the sky turn a mellow pink. The forest was still, peaceful, safe, nothing out of place. For once my thoughts weren't racing. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't worried. I remember thinking, this is exactly what I needed. If only I knew then how fast that peace was going to shatter, and how violently the forest would change once the sun went down. The shift in the forest was so subtle at first that I didn't even recognize it as a warning. It started around dusk, right when the last streaks of pink faded from the sky and the cool blue of evening began to settle between the trees. I was sitting near the creek, breaking small sticks to build up the firewood pile, when I noticed the first strange sound. A faint crack far off in the woods. Not loud, not threatening, just enough to make me pause and glance up. Probably a branch falling, I told myself. Happens all the time. But something about the sound felt too controlled, too intentional, like it had weight behind it. I shook it off and kept working, but that tiny knot of tension had already started forming in my stomach. A few minutes later another sound, this time softer, almost like footsteps on dry leaves. Slow, measured, but when I looked up again there was nothing. No movement, no shadows, just rows of darkening trees and a faint breeze stirring through the branches. I tried to ignore it, but the forest felt different now. Not dangerous, just wrong. As the temperature dropped, a thin layer of fog drifted in across the ground, creeping between the trees like it was trying not to be noticed. It wasn't thick enough to be alarming, but it dulled the forest floor, blurring shapes into soft outlines. My campsite felt a little smaller, a little more isolated. That's when the birds stopped. Usually, even at dusk, there's still a bit of chirping, fluttering, distant calls echoing through the woods. But the moment the fog crept in, the forest went quiet, eerily quiet. It felt like someone turned the volume of nature down to zero. I stood up slowly, listening. Silence. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that presses against your ears, forcing your brain to fill the emptiness with your own heartbeat. I rubbed my arms, suddenly colder than I should have been. Maybe the temperature dropped faster than usual. Maybe the fog was playing tricks on my senses. Or maybe I hated this thought, something was out there watching me. I kept telling myself I was just tired, that I'd been hiking all afternoon and I was overreacting to normal forest sounds. But I couldn't ignore the way the hairs on the back of my neck kept lifting, again and again, like static electricity was crawling across my skin. I moved closer to the fire pit and lit the first match, letting the small flame grow into a comforting crackle. The light helped a little, casting warm golden shapes along the clearing, until I noticed something that made me freeze mid-step. Every time the fire popped, it echoed, louder than usual, bouncing off the trees like the forest was hollow. That wasn't normal. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out tight and shaky. I sat down near the fire, rubbing my hands together for warmth. My eyes kept drifting toward the tree line even though I didn't want them to. Nothing moved, but it felt like the trees were holding their breath. The longer I sat there, the more the feeling grew, slow, creeping, undeniable. I wasn't alone out there. Not anymore. Something was in the woods with me, watching, waiting, silent. I don't know how long I sat there by the fire, staring at the tree line, waiting for something, anything to move. A few minutes? An hour? Time felt strange, stretched thin by the tension crawling under my skin. The forest stayed unnervingly still. No wind, no wildlife, no sound except the occasional crackle of burning wood. Then around midnight the atmosphere shifted. Not gradually, not subtly, all at once. The fire snapped violently, sending a flurry of sparks upward as if something enormous had just displaced the air around me. The temperature dropped so sharply that I could see my breath puff out in thick white clouds. My chest tightened. The air felt dense, heavy enough that every inhale fought against an invisible weight pressing down on me. I didn't hear anything at first. What I noticed was the absence. The silence wasn't just quiet anymore, it was oppressive. Then I heard it. A slow, dragging step in the darkness. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. Coming closer. The fog near the tree line shifted. Not from wind, from movement. I stood up slowly, hardly daring to blink, and that's when I finally saw it. A shape huge, hunched, almost blending into the trees as if it was carved from the forest itself. At first it looked like a man, but too tall, too broad, too wrong. Its shoulders rose and fell in deep, deliberate breaths that seemed to pull the air out of the clearing with each inhale. The firelight barely reached it, but I could make out details. Long limbs. An uneven posture like bones bent the wrong way. Skin that looked grayish in the glow, stretched tight over a frame that was unmistakably human, but twisted. I froze. The moment it realized I had seen it, it stopped moving entirely, like it was waiting to gauge my reaction, waiting to decide something. It opened its mouth, not to speak, not to growl, but to inhale sharply like it was smelling me. The sudden heaviness in the air intensified, pressing against my ribs, my spine, my throat. Fear didn't creep in this time. It slammed into me. Hard. Real. Immediate. This wasn't an animal. It wasn't a person. It wasn't something I could shout at or scare away. It was something that belonged to these woods. Something old. Something patient. Its head tilted slowly, like a predator studying a trapped animal. Me. Then it stepped forward. The firelight finally hit its face, if you could call it that. No eyes. Just two deep, hollow sockets. No lips, only skin pulled tight around jagged teeth that seemed too long for a human jaw. I stumbled back instinctively, nearly tripping over my pack. It tilted its head again. And then, without warning, it moved. Not slowly. Not dragging its feet anymore. It lunged. The heaviness in the air exploded into full-blown terror. That was the moment I understood. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't alone. I was being hunted. The creature lunged. An instinct took over before thought could. I turned and sprinted into the darkness, the fire behind me exploding in a burst of sparks as something massive crashed through it. My legs moved on their own, powered by raw blind survival. The forest blurred around me. Branches whipped my face. Roots clawed at my ankles. Every step felt like I was moments from falling, but stopping wasn't an option. Behind me it barreled forward. Not running. Charging. The ground shook with every impact of its weight. I didn't dare look back. The sound alone told me it was close, too close. Its breaths were heavy, ragged, animalistic. But there was something almost intelligent buried under the sound. Like it knew exactly how scared I was. And it liked it. I veered off the narrow trail, plunging into thicker trees. I didn't care where I was going, just away. The darkness swallowed me whole, and for a second I lost my footing, slipping down a slope hidden under leaves. I tumbled violently, crashing through brush and dirt before slamming into the base of a large tree. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I forced myself to roll behind the trunk, pressing my body flat to the ground. I clamped a hand over my mouth, fighting the urge to gasp for air. My lungs screamed. My chest burned. Every muscle trembled uncontrollably. The forest shook again. It had reached the top of the slope. I heard it sniffing long, deep, searching breaths. It scraped the ground with something sharp, something too heavy to be a claw yet too deliberate to be a branch. My heart hammered so loudly I was terrified it could hear it. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching down the slope toward me. I shut my eyes tight. Don't breathe. Don't move. Don't exist. A branch above me cracked. Not from wind. From weight. It was climbing across the fallen trees, searching. Hunting. Its silhouette moved between the trunks, too tall, too wide. Its limbs bending at unnatural angles as it scanned the forest floor. It paused. The hollow sockets on its face turned directly toward the tree I hid behind. I pressed deeper into the dirt, willing myself to melt into it. Step closer. Closer. I felt vibrations through the ground. Another step. A sudden shift, it turned away. Something in the forest made it pause. Some distant noise, maybe an animal, maybe nothing. But it seemed to pull its attention just enough. It growled, low and frustrated, then moved off in the opposite direction, crunching through the woods with thunderous footfalls. When I couldn't hear it anymore, I forced myself to crawl. Not stand, crawl deeper behind the fallen logs. My limbs shook so violently I could barely move, but I had to keep going. I reached a thick patch of brush and squeezed under it, my breath coming out in tiny, painful bursts. I stayed there, hidden, barely daring to blink. For what felt like hours I waited. Frozen. Paralyzed. listening. Every snap of a twig made my heart stop. Every whisper of wind turned into a footstep in my mind. But eventually, the forest went still again. Not safe. Never safe. But still. Just enough for me to survive another minute. Another chance to escape, if the woods let me. I don't know how long I stayed hidden under that thick patch of brush. Long enough for my legs to go numb. Long enough for my teeth to chatter from the cold. Long enough for fear to settle into something deeper than panic. Eventually, the forest regained a soft rhythm. Distant insects buzzed again. Leaves rustled lightly. The oppressive weight in the air slowly lifted, like whatever had been hunting me had moved farther away, or had simply lost interest. I told myself this was my chance. A temporary window. A fragile borrowed safety. I crawled out from the brush, my clothes covered in dirt, twigs tangled in my hair. My legs trembled beneath me as I pulled myself upright. Every movement felt too loud, too exposed, as if even the smallest sound could bring the creature back. I stood still for a long moment, listening, waiting for footsteps, for breathing, for anything. Nothing. The silence felt almost normal again. Almost. I kept low to the ground, moving carefully between the trees, heading back toward where I thought my campground was. But in the chaos of running, sliding, falling, I had lost my sense of direction. Darkness swallowed everything, making the forest unfamiliar, wrong, endless. Every tree looked like the last one. Every shadow felt like a threat. I tried using the creek to orient myself, listening for the sound of running water, but the woods seemed to swallow sound, turning everything into distant echoes. I walked for what felt like an hour before I finally heard it, the faint, steady trickle of the stream. Relief washed over me so hard I nearly collapsed. I followed the sound until the trees parted enough to reveal the glimmer of water in the moonlight. And just a few yards away, barely visible through the fog, was my campsite. Or what was left of it. The tent was shredded, ripped in long, deep slashes that cut through the fabric like it was nothing more than paper. My backpack was torn open, contents scattered everywhere. My cooking gear was bent, twisted as if crushed by an immense weight. But the fire pit, that was the part one couldn't understand. The fire I had left blazing had been completely extinguished. Not smothered. Not burned out. Stamped out with huge deep impressions in the dirt around it. Footprints. The same kind I'd seen that morning. Massive. Bare. Human shape, but wrong. So wrong. And once again they were arranged in a circle. Perfect. Deliberate. Surrounding my campsite. Facing inward. My stomach twisted painfully. I backed away, scanning the treeline for movement. The forest remained still, but the silence felt mocking, as if it was hiding something just out of view. I grabbed whatever I could salvage, a half-torn jacket, my flashlight, my phone, and sprinted through the forest without looking back. I didn't stop until I saw the faint glow of the trailhead lights between the trees. I burst into the open with tears in my eyes and lungs burning from cold air and pure dread. My truck was exactly where I left it, untouched, waiting. I jumped inside, locked the doors, and peeled out of the lot, tires skidding on gravel. I didn't slow down until I reached the highway, shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. When I finally got home, I told myself I'd call someone, park rangers, the sheriff, anyone. But what was I supposed to say? That a creature with hollow eyes hunted me in the woods? That something stomped out my fire with footprints the size of dinner plates? Who would believe that? Still, curiosity, or maybe fear, pushed me to check something. I opened the photos on my phone, hoping maybe I had taken a picture earlier in the day of the clearing or the creek. Something normal. Something real. But every picture from the trip was gone. Deleted. Every single one. Except one. A single photo remained, taken at 3:17 a.m. A photo I know I didn't take. It was a picture of my tent. Or rather the back of my tent, from just a few inches away. And in the corner of the frame, a tall gray shape, staring at the camera, as if it knew I would look eventually, as if it wanted me to see it. I stared at that photo for hours, trying to convince myself it was some glitch, some distortion, some trick of light. But deep down I knew better. Because as I zoomed in, just before the image turned grainy and distorted, I saw something impossible. A faint reflection in the hollow eye socket. My sleeping body. And after that night, one thought has never left me. What if it never left the woods? What if it followed something else home?